Welcome to Slice Property Made Possible. This season is powered by New Zealand Home Loans, local mortgage mentors who have been helping Kiwis achieve their financial goals for 27 years with proven results. The thing I love about NZHL is the mortgages are tailored for you with ongoing personalised service, coaching and tools to put you in control. It doesn't end with buying your property, they continue to help you pay down any loans and build your wealth, which can't be said about all advisors. This season, we will be playfully roasting everyday buyers and experts so you can learn from our mistakes. Head to today's episode notes to get access to our free home buyers software and your very own NZHL advisor. Awesome. Welcome back to another episode of Slice Your Property podcast. We are joined today by Chris, who is the founder of Bloxx, and he is going to share a little bit about his first home journey. Take it away.
Yeah, excited. So, unfortunately, it's a long time ago. Makes me feel very old. I was 22 when we first bought our house. This was obviously in UK, not in New Zealand. So, found out that we were expecting our first child and suddenly a bit more stability was required around our home situation. And my kind of backstory was, I grew up in social housing, single parent, all my family predominantly rent in the north of England. So home ownership wasn't on my list of things that was important.
Maybe achievable as well?
Yeah, it wasn't achievable from, support from family and parents to get into home ownership, but it kind of just wasn't even on the list because I'd not been exposed to it. All I knew was renting. That made sense to me. But, went into uni and left uni and just kind of fell into banking. Kind of don't know how it happened, but suddenly ended up working for the bank. And the bank kind of gave me the leg up. So they did a staff mortgage program. And the way that worked, and these things aren't around anymore, but it was basically, I didn't need to have a deposit. So it was 100% loan to value.
Love.
So it took away that problem of finding the deposit hurdle. And then the other bit was the bank didn't make any money on my loan because I was a staff member, so it was a staff benefit. So in essence...
Although those benefits are much better than even the banking benefits you get as an employee now.
Yes, this was before I even got taxed. And so basically it was cheaper for me to buy a house than to rent one. And that's kind of the only reason why I did it. But then working in the bank, financial acumen went through the roof, even in 6 months, and kind of looked back on that and went, that was the best financial decision I made without even knowing what I was doing, really. But then, what you realise very quickly when you move into your first home is it just feels different. And it's not necessarily the financial side of home ownership.
It's the emotional.
It's the emotional side. I don't have a landlord. Nobody's coming around checking on me. If we want to go get a dog or decorate a room or renovate, we can do that. And it just feels very, very different.
Yeah, the stability that comes with that as well, right?
Yep.
Awesome. And when it comes to the process going through and buying that, obviously the finances, you had the support from the bank there, but the due diligence process and the going through the documents and everything, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit different for me because being an employee of the bank, it was kind of an internal type transaction, if you like. So I didn't have the broker or the branch to be dealing with. In terms of the property purchase,
like the due diligence, like looking at the legal documents and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this was a fair while ago in the UK, and the UK is slightly different in terms of how you buy houses. So there isn't, things like auctions don't really exist.
Yeah. You still got to do due diligence, though, Chris.
You do still have to do due diligence, and it was predominantly, in the UK, you've got a lot of older properties. A lot of properties are leasehold, but it's very old-fashioned leasehold. So there was a need to look at the building structure, make sure that there isn't any leaks, any underlying mould, all the kind of usual things that you get in UK building construction. But they're quite they're well understood processes.
Yeah.
So I went through that. That was a bit of a learning curve. Sat with the lawyer, being shown all these different kind of diagrams from 100 years ago and looking through that detail. But it was also, it was fairly straightforward. I mean, we weren't buying anything sophisticated or complex. It was our first home. But lots to it, but well navigated through that process in combination between the bank and the lawyer.
Yeah, so in terms of looking at the legal documents and kind of like quotes for insurance, obviously it was some time ago, but kind of going through that, you relied quite heavily on the partners, it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, the insurance was all within the bank as well, because that was all within the staff side of things. So it took away a large amount of complexity for me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it was kind of taken care of,
Yeah.
which was really helpful when you're 22, only ever rented, looking at this thing going, I don't really know how to buy a house, and I've got nobody I can really go and rely on in the family to give me the assistance here. So it was, I mean, we in particular focused on getting a good lawyer.
Yeah.
And those recommendations came through the bank as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And going through all the documents and things like that, it sounds like we had, a few Q&As that we went through, and it looks like you basically went lawyer.
Correct.
To everything, to every kind of due diligence question. It's time for a segment we're calling Roast My Home Hunt. It's time to roast, don't take it to heart. When we learn from your mistakes, we all get smart.
Yeah, I mean, I run that.
Next, you're going to tell me like you go out to the restaurant and you call your lawyer and ask what you should be ordering.
Maybe not. It costs more than the meal to get that advice.
It would be.
No, I'm joking. No, I mean, I kind of how I work in business. I find somebody who I can trust, who is very knowledgeable, who understands and has run through the process many, many times, and then I kind of rely on that advice.
Yeah.
There is limitations to that, but the kind of building reports you get in the UK, they aren't that complicated or difficult to understand.
Yeah.
And the one thing I did do when I was growing up is I did a lot of DIY and things like that. So you can look around and look at things as well. And I kind of viewed it as a first home.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a ridiculous amount of money. It was like £40,000-50,000 was the house. So it wasn't. We're not buying $1 million property as well.
Yeah. But also, it was obviously a little while ago.
It was a long time ago.
I guess in terms of like going through those documents and things like that, I think one thing to reflect on now, and if you were to buy again now, I know things have changed both in the way that you buy in New Zealand and in the way that you buy in the UK. But yes, you can rely on those partners, and I think it's so important to have the right partners. But there is also an element of kind of reviewing that documentation and going through bits and pieces that you actually have to own as the buyer. Like, I think there is now a real focus on at least having a view of some of those things as they're coming together. Do you think you would look at that differently and buy differently?
Yeah, I mean, the more experienced you are, the more you know yourself what you should be looking at. I mean,
because at this point, it's not like we can reflect on any mistakes, because any mistakes made would be your lawyers.
but I mean, going back in time, part of the advice from the lawyer is look into this bit carefully.
Yeah.
They are directing me, because they can't give me advice on things like building reports.
Yeah, exactly.
But they can give me an arm around
advice
the shoulder.
to look at the building report.
Make sure you look at this, and this. So, yeah.
I think that's a good learning and for buyers that are in the current market, and I found this myself going through that journey. Obviously, you need those partners, but it's understanding where the partner is in their element and actually where those gaps are, because there are pieces that are yours to own. Like, you have to review the building report, you have to interpret that, you have to review if there's something, when you're going around and visiting the house, if there's something you see there and that's not showing up on some of the legal documents, your lawyer actually can't pick that up because they're not walking through the house. So there are elements in which, as a buyer, you really have to be involved, right?
Yes, absolutely. There's responsibility on you. I was very lucky in that, a lot of those, first buying things kind of were taken care of by different aspects of looking after me through the process.
So you thought. No,
well, maybe I just got lucky, right?
Maybe. But I mean, it's definitely, the process has changed a lot over the years, and also the way that people used to buy property as well, I think. Like, it's probably quite hard to compare and pinpoint like what you'd do differently, because it's quite some time ago, and actually back in the day the bank would just be like, here's your insurance, here's your money, go buy the home.
Correct.
It was a lot looser, not just for the buyers but for the partners involved as well.
Yes.
But also the building qualities were probably much better back in the day. So
it is very different in the UK because the building structure is different.
Pretty sound. Yeah. There's a lot of
there's a lot harsh weather over there.
And there's like a lot of brick and kind of
stone
concrete and stone.
Yep.
So really kind of solid material. So it's a different structure, but there's still, of course, things that can go wrong.
There is commonalities between the two, but I agree with the point around, it is more complicated now.
And
it's navigating your way through that. It's not impossible, it's not scary, but you just got to know how to get through that.
And there's just more crap to sift through, I'd say, in terms of quality of buildings, and kind of not all houses are created equal, is what I would say.
And that can be a number of different reasons, but yeah, that's part of what we're trying to do, in that taking some of the risk out of buying, and in particular out of buying new build.
Let's move into what you're doing with Bloxx, because it's really really a cool mission that you've got and that you're working towards. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
I mean, the crux of it is, if I go back to my kind of leg up through the staff mortgage to get into a house, we're trying to recreate that moment for as many Kiwis as possible, and Brits, because we're launched in the UK as well. To achieve that, I wish I could wave a magic wand and make house prices cheaper.
I mean, if you did it over the last year, I think it worked. But I mean, they can always be lower.
They can always be lower, but they can always be higher, and who knows where the market's going to head. So what we've set to task to do at Bloxx is going, how do you make it affordable for people to buy a home? How do you make it equivalent to the cost of renting, similar to when I bought my first home? So we've really been spending the last 2 years going, how can we reconstruct the way that the system works to give that value and that benefit back to the consumer? Because we can't accept a generation of people renting. Because to the points I made around me buying my first home, it's not just a financial decision. It affects a lot of things in life. Being part of a community, having stability around the kids going to school, all those kind of wonderful things. It's really, really important. So we've been going to work around how do we enable people to buy a home and not require a mortgage. Sounds pretty crazy, but at the heart of it is a lot of restructuring of how financial markets, capital markets flow into the system, and how then we can create new products to enable people to buy into homes rather than pay back loans on homes. Hoping my 20 plus years experience in the banking industry can come to some good and deliver something completely different.
And I think we were talking about this before. I think a really easy way to think about it is that when you remove some of the components in the banking system and other kind of paid providers in that group, you can make it much more affordable so that people can come in and just actually, instead of paying interest, buy in at the level of this is the property value, and then kind of pay that off over time in lieu of rent instead of rent. Do you want to kind of share that explanation?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, and I've spoken to a lot of customers, about these kind of ideas, and there's one thing that people seem to lock on, and they kind of think the bank has the money when you buy in the house that they give to you. When actually say, no, the bank's an intermediary. They get the money from somewhere else, whether that's historically been people saving, depositing funds in there, or more recently it's wholesale investment coming in from pension funds, hedge firms, institutional investors. So what Bloxx is designed to do is kind of be a new intermediary.
Give the buyers access to that money to buy in without the interest.
Without the interest, which is a massive component part of that, without the additional costs that might come from organisations that sit around the home buying process. Because all of this is kind of loaded onto a customer, and it enables us to remove the barriers around deposits, so not needing big deposits because we're not lending you any money. And then it also enables us to make the payment 40% cheaper than a mortgage every month, equivalent to renting over the 5 years, and it's fixed. So you've got complete payment certainty. And then the last thing we do is give them all the options. So normally, if I'm in a mortgage contract, for me to overpay is going to cost me some money to do that, because obviously, there's a contract in play. Whereas we're saying, no, you can overpay and buy as much equity as you want, as quick as you want. There's no fees, there's no charges. You can buy out the whole contract if you wish at any point. So there's a lot of options that are given to the customer to give them flexibility through that period, because life happens and we just want to work with them through that.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear. And I mean, we love having people on the podcast that are doing different things and trying to enable these different ways into home ownership. Have you spoken, just sort of as I'm listening to you, have you spoken to Sam Stubbs much? Just quickly for the audience, so Sam Stubbs is the CEO of Simplicity,
yes,
which is a sort of KiwiSaver superannuation type fund, and they're looking at how they can deploy some of that fund into home ownership. So I can see some real synergies between what you're trying to do in terms of just grabbing access to those kind of funds without it moving through a bank first. Yeah,
so I mean, Sam and I connected when I did a TEDx talk, that'd be back in 2017.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was trying to kind of get the bank to move into this space because I was still in the bank. So I was talking around that on stage. And because I then left to the UK for a few years, launched a company in the US, and then came back to New Zealand 2023, 2 years ago now. And we reconnected over a coffee. Simplicity is, like all Kiwi savers, naturally one of our future target customers on the investment side of our business.
Yeah, that makes sense, particularly because they're also wanting to move that fund towards home ownership opportunities.
Correct. I think, Sam's focus is obviously largely on build to rent, which is absolutely needed and a core part of the market. We're very much focused on trying to create ownership because we want to move generation rent into owning. We can't accept that everybody's going to get trapped renting.
I think those two things could come together. I'm manifesting it.
That is good to hear. So Sam, if you're listening.
Yeah. We'll get Sam back on the podcast and I'll be like, so when you last speak to Chris?
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, it's just really interesting and it's great to hear that you are, doing what you can to disrupt and create options where people don't have to pay the extreme amounts of interest that they do. And I'm sure you've got a lot of interest, but obviously much as we are, managing a couple of sides to the business and trying to manage bringing in the funds to support that and to support entry into home ownership. But keep on charging, and I look forward to hearing about the new Simplicity and Bloxx relationship. Have you actually since purchased in New Zealand, and how was that different to your experience in the UK?
Yeah, so when I came out here first time round, when I was working in the banks, I didn't actually know how long we were going to be here for. So I moved out here, 6 kids, never been here, didn't know anybody here.
Still here?
Still here, went back in the middle.
Yeah.
I was only leaving for 6 months, but I landed in England December 2019 and got trapped there for 3 years.
Yes,
yeah.
Yo, COVID.
And I wasn't going into MIQ with my 6. Anyway, I probably wouldn't have come out of that alive. And since I've come back, I've been bootstrapping the company. And that is a huge sacrifice. So I've not been earning any income for over 2 years now. I am actually, and there is a beautiful thing around this, especially in the last 2 years, because we've had to move once already because the landlord that we had the first time round had to sell because of the hike in interest rates. He was over leveraged and he couldn't keep the home even though we'd agreed to, verbally stay there for at least 2 or 3 years while I got the business stood up.
Yeah.
So there was a huge upheaval to move the family and, all the pets and everything. So I know how hard renting is in this country. It is difficult. I wouldn't be doing it through choice, but I'm doing it through sacrifice because I have to get this company where it needs to be. Yeah,
and I think that is a really valid reason to not own property. As much as I'm so pro kind of trying to get people into it, and we both are.
Yep.
It is where there is something like a business or something like that, or some other investment strategy which makes sense. But yeah, good on you for making that sacrifice, and I wish you all the best with Bloxx because it's really such a great opportunity, and I hope that it goes in the direction that it should. But hey, before I let you go, I do have one last question for you, Chris, which is, if your first home had a doorbell and that doorbell played a theme song, what song would it play?
I think, and this is going to sound like a really naff answer, but I think I'd go the Back to the Future theme tune just because I still love that film. It's not intellectual, but it was just like Back to the Future 2 in particular.
That's
just
the one Michael J. Fox was in there.
Yeah, and the one where he went into the future and you saw the flying cars, and I remember watching it as a younger person and just thinking, wow. And so that kind of always stuck to it. And maybe that's part of my, always challenging the status quo and trying to change the way that the world is, because, maybe some point we'll get the flying cars properly.
I reckon we will. We're probably not even that far away.
I appreciate that, and thank you for the time to have a chat.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining our community. Please leave an Apple or Spotify review and provide feedback so we can improve our podcast for you. We really appreciate it. Check out the links in today's episode notes to get access to our free resources and your own NZ Home Loans financial advisor. On that note, a quick reminder, Slice the podcast does not provide financial advice as we're not taking into account your personal circumstances. However, when you join our platform, we have a team of partners like New Zealand Home Loans ready to provide you with financial advice free of charge.